From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. If you've ever walked near a landfill or driven by one on a warm summer day with your windows down, you know there's a certain smell it puts out. But Colorado's landfills also produce massive amounts of methane, emitting about as much dirty air as driving 1 million cars for a year. And that concerns health officials more than any smell, because methane contributes to climate change and has other nasty health effects we'll get to in a moment. Jennifer Oldham is an environmental journalist based in Denver. She recently wrote about this issue for the publication Capital in Maine. And she says health regulators may ask Colorado's landfill operators to measure and track their methane emissions, which they've never had to do before. She joined me to talk about the problem and potential solutions.
So it's important to remember that methane is odorless and colorless, so you won't necessarily see it when it's coming out of a landfill. And what's accompanying the methane is also colorless, which is volatile organic compounds, which includes some cancer-causing compounds that have been scientifically shown to cause health issues. And folks that live near landfills are particularly exposed to these compounds, which is very concerning. The other piece of this as well that we can all see now in June is ozone. All of us that live here along the Front Range have watched over the last couple of years as our ozone pollution has grown as a problem over the summer. You know, it cloaks the mountains in this white cloud of smog.
Yeah.
And this ozone pollution is caused by these volatile organic compounds that escape from landfills and fossil fuel production and agriculture. So this is another way to get our arms around ozone.
Earlier this year, in April, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment released a draft of new rules that would require landfills to monitor methane emissions. And if the amounts of methane reach a certain amount, landfill operators would have to install a system to capture that gas. That sounds expensive. I'm wondering, would the burden fall on landfill operators primarily, or would the state step in with some financial help?
There was some federal funding available that my understanding is that the state had considered that as a way to help with some of this new ways to technically measure emissions from landfills. But like all federal funding right now, it's unclear what the status of that is.
And you reported that some landfills make money by selling methane as energy. Could you talk about that, and what does that entail?
Yes, so there is a way, technologically speaking, for these landfill operators to capture this methane and then turn it into energy, because methane is a component of natural gas. For example, the Denver area landfill, they capture some methane and turn it into energy and return it to the Excel grid. And so that certainly is a way to profit from capturing the gas. There are also other landfills in the state that are trying those systems out. So that is a way that the costs of installing a system like this can be offset.
Jennifer, could you talk about why it's important to tackle methane emissions from landfills? I'm wondering, how would getting landfill emissions under control help Colorado get closer to its climate goals?
And that's a good question, and that's really at the heart of this, right? Colorado has these pretty ambitious climate goals that are required under law, and there are some harder ways to reach those goals, which include reducing emissions from transportation, reducing emissions from oil and gas extraction. These things take time and more regulatory effort.
Sure.
So these landfill emissions rules, regulators are looking to design them in such a way that they would be an easier short-term fix than some of these other things that take a longer time and are more difficult and more complex to achieve.
Sure. So they're kind of like low-hanging fruit for this. In terms of how much it would cut emissions, what do state regulators say?
Well, according to the figures they have right now, landfills contribute about 1% of the greenhouse gas emissions in Colorado. It's a smaller number, but it's important to remember, the potency of methane and its ability to capture heat in the atmosphere, which leads to this more intense extreme weather that we've been having and can contribute to these extreme wildfires we've been having. So if there's any way to capture methane and ensure it doesn't get into the atmosphere, that is as important as how much it would reduce overall.
How likely is it, Jennifer, that Colorado's draft regulations will be adopted and put in place?
It's always hard to predict what's going to happen,
No
especially when it
crystal ball?
involves politics. I would say, though, that last fall, the Air Quality Control Commission in the state expanded greenhouse gas emissions reporting requirements for several sources of air pollution across Colorado, including landfills. And so because of this, more than 30 landfills that didn't previously report their greenhouse gas emissions are required to do so now. And so air quality regulators here in the state are hoping to build on those requirements with these new regulations that will be considered in August. So it appears like there's momentum behind them. There's been a lot of testimony at hearings that the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment has been holding about these landfill proposals by residents saying, hey, I can tell this is impacting my health. Also, we can all see it's impacting our ozone pollution.
And lastly, are there things that everyday consumers can do to help cut landfill emissions? And do we need to stop buying bananas?
I certainly would never advocate for stopping buying bananas. They're one of my favorite fruits. I would say yes, there is a way we can all help here. There's a way we can bring this issue to the home level and to our trash basket level. And this would be by composting at home. You can buy these little circular drums. I have a couple outside my house where you put in your organic material and you spin them.
Right.
You can stuff some newspaper in there while you're at it. Read the newspaper.
Oh, perfect.
Also, there are quite a few entrepreneurial activities happening perhaps at an area near you where people take it upon themselves to go out and collect their neighbors' composting and then return that to the soil. So in that way, we can all do our own individual part to cut down on this methane pollution.
Jennifer Oldham is an environmental reporter based in Denver. By the way, she mentioned that a handful of other states like California, Oregon, Washington, and Maryland have enacted some regulations to rein in landfill emissions that have been successful. We'll include a link to her story in our show notes and at KUNC.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.